Howdy friends, thanks for clicking on this video, and I hope that you will find what I'm going to present to be enlightening, thought-provoking, and maybe to help clarify maybe some things. And as you can probably tell, it's about the Bible. Before I get into what I have to present, I want to encourage you, if you can safely, Jehovah's Witnesses, without outing yourself on some other social media platforms you might be connected to. I hope you will subscribe and also give a thumbs up to this video if you can do it safely. If not, it's no big deal to us because we're not about numbers, we're not about money or anything like that. We're just about research, study, encouraging those that are having issues with religions and, you know, things of this nature. But I do want to thank Jane Doe for letting me know about a video that she had watched. I'm going to put a link down below. And it's almost a 2-hour long video, and it features the gentleman James Valliant, who wrote a book entitled Creating Christ. And the whole thrust of his research has to do with Rome inventing the Jesus character. And I've mentioned this to Jane Doe before. When you're dealing with a group of people that are extremists and you need to try to subjugate and you can't, well, obviously we know what happened in 70 CE. Those people were obliterated. And from that point forward, in order to squelch any other type of uprising, what would you have to do? Well, you would have to play upon some of their religious and or governmental ideologies. You wouldn't have to necessarily indoctrinate the surviving members, but how far out of the way would you go to indoctrinate the children? And it's a very easy thing to see in our day and age because it's even being done in some of our schools across the United States of America. The school teachers are indoctrinating the children at this young age. And it's a very influential indoctrination. Now, I'm not going to give you guys an overall view of this because it would be too long, but I will tell you from all of the study and researching that I've been doing for the past 10 years, I have come to similar conclusions. But I want to show you something that I did not draw a conclusion on, but this gentleman, James Valliant, mentioned it in this interview. And I would like to share that with you now along with something else that I had learned a while back. So what this gentleman mentioned, it's actually a contradiction. It actually is. So what I want you to do first is to get your Bibles. Now I'm going to read this from a real King James Version Bible. And I'm choosing to read this from the real King James Version for a very specific reason. And I'll get to that in just a few moments. But what I would like you to do, because I want to share with you something that helped this gentleman, James Valliant, recognize that this story of Jesus was actually a Roman invention to help subjugate the Jewish people after the revolt and the rebellion that led up to their demise in 70 CE, and then in 73 CE, I believe it was, the remaining rebellious ones at Masada. So anyhow, reading this from a real Bible so that there's no errors, there's no question about what's going on here. I'm going to read it from the King James. John chapter 18, and we're going to start reading at verse 28. Now this has to do in part with the trial of Jesus. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Now, when you read this in a more modern day Bible, this is when Caiaphas is taking Jesus over to Pilate. Verse 29, Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? Once again referring to Jesus. Verse 30, They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then Pilate said unto them, Take ye him, and judge him according to your law, the law of the Jews. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death. Now think about what these scribes and Pharisees led by Caiaphas are saying. Pilate says, look, you go deal with this Jesus according to your own law. And then the scribes and the Pharisees say, it is not lawful for us to put any man to death. Now remember, in a more modern day English Bible, they were accusing Jesus of heresy and blasphemy against God. Okay, so now let's go to Acts. No, better yet, let's go to John chapter 8. And this is the reason I want to read this from a real Bible, the King James Version. Because a more modern day version of the Bible recognizes that what I'm about to read to you does not reside in all manuscripts. But because in this community of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, we keep hearing, get yourself a real Bible, get the King James Bible because it's a real Bible. This Bible does not put the qualifier ahead or in advance of you reading this story. So I want to read the real story from the real Bible. John chapter 8, starting at verse 1. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? Then they said, tempting him. Though this they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. That's why I hate the King James Version. That's why I loathe this Bible. Because we don't speak this way anymore. We don't read this way anymore. But the King Jamesers just love the these and the thous and the what fors and everything else. But yet there's a reason why. Okay? So going on, Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. The part that I want to focus on is this. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. In other words, put to death. Well, what did we just read in John 18? It's not within their law to put anybody to death. Now, some people may say, well, but see, the law in this particular case only applied to women. It didn't apply to men. It only applied to women. I'm going to debunk that. Go to Acts chapter 6. Start with verse 11. Better yet, we're going to read this from a real English-speaking Bible. Acts chapter 6, starting with verse 11. Then they secretly induced men to say, "We have heard him speaking blasphemous sayings against Moses and God." And they stirred up the people and the older men and the scribes, and coming upon him suddenly, they took him by force and led him to the Sanhedrin, which was, the council of Jewish religious leaders. Okay? And they brought forward false witnesses who said, "This man does not stop speaking things against the holy place and against the law." Now, if you friends just go ahead and read all of this, including chapter 7, you will see what's going on in this mock trial of Stephen. Okay? You go down to verse 22 of chapter 7. Stephen says, "Consequently, Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians." Jehovah didn't instruct him. The Egyptians did. In fact, he was powerful in words and deeds. Powerful in words and deeds, but yet Moses himself said he had a speech impediment. Okay? Going on over to, once you guys read all of this, you can absolutely see what's coming out of Stephen's mouth is anti-Semitic. Even to the point over verse 38. "This he came to be among the congregation in the wilderness with the angel that spoke to him on Mount Sinai." See, it wasn't God. It was an angel. Verse 42. "So God turned and handed them over to render sacred service to the army of the heavens, just as it is written in the book of the prophets. It was not to me that you offered victims of sacrifices for 40 years in the wilderness, was it, O house of Israel? But it was the tent of Moloch and the star of the god Rephan that you took up, the figures which you made to worship them. Consequently, I will deport you beyond Babylon." Going over to verse 48. Nevertheless, well, better yet, let's start with verse 47. "However, Solomon built a house to him," meaning Jehovah, Yahweh. Verse 48. "Nevertheless, the Most High does not dwell in houses made with hands, just as the prophet says, 'The heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool.' What sort of house would you build for me? Jehovah says. Or what is the place of my resting? My hand made all these things, did it not?" There again, verse 53. "You who received the law as transmitted by angels." Verse 54. "Well, at hearing these things, they felt cut to the heart. They began to gnash their teeth at him." In other words, they're getting ready to stone Stephen. And the Apostle Paul, what does it says? Chapter 8, verse 1, "Saul, for his part, was approving of the murder of him." But, didn't the scribes and the Pharisees before Pilate say it's not lawful to put a man to death? But yet here they are. Here they are putting Stephen to death. And Paul is approving of it. I want you friends to ask yourselves, who does such a story really benefit? Rome or Orthodox Judaism? Think about it. Friends, think about it. If you take the time and listen to what people are saying about the Bible in this modern day and era, you can absolutely comprehend that this was written by the Romans to disarm a rebellious group of people. It's not hard. Now, I want to share this even further with you, because when I was reading the book Caesar's Messiah by Joseph Atwell, I came to that same conclusion, because it's all there. Everything in the New Testament is actually written as an anti-Semitic writing. Even in the Old Testament, it's still written against Orthodox Judaism. I've done videos in the past reading from the Old Testament where God says, "Who taught you to sacrifice? I never called for the sacrifice." That's clearly anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, anti-Moses. Clearly against that. But nobody wants to resonate up here and see this for what it actually is. It's a fear control mechanism. If you don't pay your taxes, Caesar's going to come after you. If you don't pay the temple tax, Jehovah's going to destroy you. Jehovah's going to do this to you, and Jehovah's going to do that to you. It's not difficult to see what these priests and ministers of fear have done to us. It's not hard. Okay, I want to read something from his book, and this was something that Kim and I had done in a video some time back, and it's talking about why so many characters in the New Testament are named Mary, Martha, all of those type of names with the M-A-R. And if you take a time to go and watch the movie U-571, there's a scene in there where the American soldier calls a bunch of captured Germans a bunch of Marys. There's a reason for that, because it's anti-Jewish. It's not a good terminology in the eyes of Jewish people. Okay, so this is what Joseph Atwell writes on page 99. Okay, and he's talking about Martha, Lazarus' sister, is on the list because, and what he's talking about is, well, let me just read the list, okay? You've got number 1, Mary, mother of Jesus. Number 2, Mary Magdalene. Number 3, Mary, the sister of Lazarus and Martha of Bethany. Number 4, Mary of Cleophas, the mother of James the Less. Number 5, Mary, the mother of John Mark, a sister of Barnabas. Number 6, Martha, the sister of Lazarus and Mary of Bethany. But let's not also forget Jesus' aunt at the cross. Mary's sister is also named Mary. We did a video on that. So anyhow, what and why would Rome write a story and have so many Marys in this story? Because it's a derogatory term. Okay, so I'm going to read here just a little bit. Let's see here. Maybe I won't. I've actually got quite a bit highlighted here because this was featured in our video some time back. But I want to read this little portion right here. He writes, "I would conjecture that during the war," talking about the Roman Jewish wars that led up to the destruction of Jerusalem, "Mary became a Roman nickname for female rebels, in such the same manner that enemy soldiers have been referred to by a single name during the modern era. For example, American soldiers called their enemy Charlie during the Vietnam War and Kraut during World War II. One can imagine a Roman centurion ordering all the Marys to be separated from the men, following the capture of a group of Jewish rebels. This name may have then been continued by the authors of the New Testament to mockingly make the point that all the female followers of the Messiah were rebels. And then he has a reference to Strong's Concordance. And that's where this all comes together. Okay? And like I said, even in the movie U-571, the American soldier calls the captured German soldiers a bunch of Marys. Okay. He references Strong's Concordance number 3136, and I have the Strong's Concordance. So you go to number 3136, and it reads, Martha, probably of a Chaldean, meaning mistress, woman Martha. But then he also references number 3137. Now, as I do this, guys, I'm reading from the Greek dictionary of the Old Testament. So you have to backtrack this, and this is what I'm going to do. So you go to number 3137. And it's Miriam, which is another name, Miriam of Hebrew, and it gives another number, 4813. Okay, the name of 6 Chaldean females, Mary. Okay, but it wants you to go to number 4813. So I'm going to find 4813 and read what that says. So let me correct that real quick. In Hebrew, they're referencing number 4813. So what I need to do is go over to the Hebrew portion and read number 4813. And you read 4813, it says Miriam, the name of 2 Israelitists. But the thing is it says Miriam is from number 4805. So you go up to 4805, and it says bitterness, rebellion, bitter or rebellious, rebel, lion. So it was very appropriate for the Romans to invent this character, invent this story, and have the women bear the name Mary, Miriam, Martha, M-A-R. Rebellious, bitterness. It all makes sense when you have the time to reference, the time to think this through, and believe me, friends, I'm not the only one that recognizes this. Several years ago, I watched a clip from the Simpsons cartoon. And I forget the name of the character, and it wasn't Bart. It was one of the other characters. They were sitting in a classroom, and he had his little iPhone, and that was during the days when we all had problems with autocorrect. So this is how far back this actually goes. So the main character sitting in class was texting himself or writing himself a little note, and he wrote, after school, beat up Martin. Autocorrect came across and said, eat up Martha. That's a direct reference, in my very strong opinion, well-researched, strong opinion, that has reference to when the Roman armies encircled Jerusalem and women were eating their own children. Eat up Martha, because Rome was starving them out by this time. And we know, as Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower uses that all the time to show how bad things got back in those days. And they actually did. That was a horrible Armageddon, that time in history. But you have to recognize, friends, if you read this book through the eyes of Rome, trying to subjugate what would be rebellious people, people that were fanatics, then you understand why the writers would go out of the way and have Jesus secretly make all foods clean. That's absolutely anti-Orthodox Judaism. Absolutely anti-Orthodox Judaism. But yet, their Messiah did it. Paul did the same thing. Well, you know that all these foods sacrificed to idols, they mean nothing to us, so go ahead and eat up. Go ahead and eat up the food. How do you know you won't, fix somebody's bad conscience? Pay things to Caesar. The same thing with that little coin. Get me a coin. Whose image is on it? You pay Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. Romans 13. Be obedient, says Paul, to the authorities, because there is no authority except by God. I just hope that you friends will take the time to watch the video that I've linked below. Because when you absolutely look at this book through the Roman eyes, as the writers, the inventors, Caesar's Messiah, it becomes very clear what's going on here. The thing that I find so discouraging about all of this, like Watchtower. Watchtower has actually become the very thing that they've hated. They've become tyrannical. They've become extremists, even to the point of letting their children die in operating rooms, refusing blood. They've gone out of their way to point a finger at Christianity, the Catholic Church in particular, hiding the CSA problem that they themselves bear the burden and the scar. And yet they continue to deflect. Continue to deflect. The thing about the Bible, friends, is that when if Rome was writing this to subjugate or to tame a rebellious people, and you understand that our founding fathers left that type of control and came to this country and gave us new documents, the Constitution, freedom of religion, freedom of ourselves, our own sovereignty. But yet, under the guise of that freedom of religion, we're right back to the very thing that they escaped the old world of. Control by government and church. So the very thing that Rome was trying to stop, we have now once again put on as our identity. Jane Doe did a video reading right from Wikipedia that even in the early days, Christians were killing Christians. Over what? Theology? Because you didn't really comprehend that this was written from Rome? Even Joseph Atwell points to the same thing. I encourage you, friends, to do your study, to do your research, and look at this book through a different set of eyes and comprehend and understand why There are so many things in this book that is anti-Semitic, because it is. It actually is. Because the writers went out of their way to show how anti-Semitic they were. But it wasn't so much being anti-Semitic as it was trying to subjugate a very rebellious people. Think about it. Go back and look at some of the names of Jesus' disciples. They were all fighting against Rome. They were all fighting against Rome because they wanted their sovereignty. But that sovereignty came at the ultimate price. And yet, now it's mocked in this book. And Christians just love to mock this. They just love to mock it. Sad thing is they don't even have a clue that they're doing it. They don't have a clue. Because the leader of this world, the God of this world, has blinded their eyes. Thanks for watching, and you friends have a wonderful day, and please take the time and watch the video below and think about what's being stated. Have a great day. Bye.